Hello, everyone, and welcome to Making Remote Work. Today, I have the honor of welcoming Tammy Allen, Professor of Psychology at the University of South Florida, and Jay Narayanan, Professor of Management and Organizational Behavior at the National University of Singapore. Tammy, Jay, welcome to Making Remote Work.
Thank you for having us.
Before we go into all of the discussions that we have planned for today, which are very nice, very interesting, unique in all of this series, would you be okay to introduce yourself, your research, and a bit of your influences on your work and on yourself personally, so people get to know you better?
So my core research focus over the past 25 or so years has been on work-family issues. And my general background is in industrial organizational psychology. So I'm interested in the challenges that individuals face in managing competing demands between their work and family roles. So these competing demands often result in what is referred to as work-family conflict. So we study what the predictors are of these conflicts and what are the outcomes of these conflicts. But the underlying motivation to the overall line of research is to identify ways by which individuals can be both satisfied and productive in their work and their family lives. So that includes understanding what organizations can do to help, as well as individual tools. So this led me to an interest some years ago on flexible work arrangements, such as remote work. Because for many years, remote work has been touted as a way to help individuals manage work and family. But what we have found in our research that it's not really a particularly beneficial way to mitigate work-family conflict. So we also turned to individual approaches, and that is what led me to research on mindfulness. And when we think about conflicts between work and family, they often involve difficulty attending to the role that you're in because of interference from the other role. So, for example, you're engaged in a conversation with a coworker about a project, but you keep thinking about an ill parent. Or you're trying to help your child with homework, but your mind keeps drifting to that work deadline that you're behind on. So mindfulness can help improve one's ability to be in the moment and to effectively regulate thoughts and emotions. So there haven't been a lot of studies just yet connecting work, family, and mindfulness, but the initial results have been positive. So that's a little bit about my overall program of research.
Great, thanks, Tammy. Jay?
Yes, thank you, Tammy. So I came to doing mindfulness work more from a personal hobby, So I started off studying power and status and how hierarchies affect behaviors at the workplace. My dissertation actually early on was on the impact of status dynamics on workplace relationships. So much of my early work, although I did dabble with mindfulness on the side because I had a personal practice, was around issues of hierarchy at the workplace. Like I said, I always studied mindfulness very early on in my career, but didn't quite get to it as my main line of research because it was more driven by a personal practice. And actually, there was a point in time where I did get quite disillusioned with mindfulness research because it was so hard to publish. There was a time when it was very hard to publish that work, but not so much these days. I come at mindfulness from more of a personal practice, but in the recent past, we've done some work, especially in the light of the pandemic, given that we are going to perhaps have a mental health, well-being kind of a crisis going forward. Time is right for organizations to look for interventions and ways that they can help employees deal with all of the challenges of being at the workplace. So that's how I come at for mindfulness research. But my initial identity was not of someone who studies mindfulness, but more as a practitioner of mindfulness. So that's briefly who I am.
Thanks, Jay. And I guess, as everyone has guessed already, the thin red line of our discussion today is going to be mindfulness, but we're going to discuss different topics related to remote work as well, having mindfulness in mind. Before we go further, Can you tell me a bit about what is mindfulness? What is mindfulness versus meditation? At some point, it still has a yoga kind of connotation. Not everyone is up for any kind of mindfulness practice, or they think of it as a strange practice. So what is it and what is not mindfulness?
So I think, it's important to make a distinction between mindfulness as a concept as we study it in psychology and the idea of meditation. So meditation is an intervention that can enhance mindfulness, but it by no means is the only way to enhance mindfulness. So we study mindfulness both as a trait and as a state, as well as something that you can intervene and change. Of course, the inspiration for mindfulness comes from the contemplative traditions. So to define mindfulness, mindfulness is simply an ability to stay in the moment. So as I'm speaking with you, am I present to my a conversation with you, my experience of speaking with you, or is my mind wandering off and thinking about what am I going to have for dinner, what am I going to do tomorrow? So to really bring the mind back to the moment, that's what mindfulness is as an ability, as a trait. But of course, meditation is one of the core ways in which you can enhance your ability to be mindful. I actually don't quite like the word mindfulness. I actually like the word, perhaps something like cognitive tuning or attention training. These are probably better descriptors of what it is. One of my colleagues, when I said mindfulness, said, if you're mindful, isn't it so stressful? Like, shouldn't you just let go and be mindless? And I agree. There is a bit of that loadedness in that word. So I don't know what Tammy thinks. I'm curious to hear actually what she thinks of the term.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jaya said. That's a shared definition there. I would add to that, another aspect of mindfulness is the ability to be less judgmental, less reactive, and to again, it gets at that aspect of being able to regulate our emotions so that we're in touch with how we are feeling in the moment and able to react more with kindness and compassion.
Is there something that we could say this is not mindfulness? Is it would it be an antonym? Would it be mindlessness, or would you say something different? Or absent-mindedness?
Yeah, those things would be, and I think we also study mind wandering as opposed to mindfulness. So if you're thinking about the past or the future, those would be what mindfulness is not, right? Mindfulness is very much staying in the moment. There is work that shows mind wandering can be beneficial in certain ways, but essentially attending to the moment and to the experience of the moment is what mindfulness would be.
And I have a very personal interest. I'm a very big fan of Professor Csikszentmihalyi's work, which talks about flow. It's in a bit of a different context. So how would you connect mindfulness with his concept of flow?
So that's a great question, Lulia. So in fact, we just did a study where we thought of studying that. The results are all over the place. But more importantly, I think the way I see it is mindfulness is perhaps maybe there are studies that I'm not aware of, but mindfulness is a key that can open the door to flow. So because if you're able to attend to what you have in front of you, to the moment, then you are bringing in the resources required to generate the flow experience. At least that's how I think of the relationship between mindfulness and flow, because flow essentially is where the challenge of the situation meets the abilities you bring to the table. So perhaps mindfulness allows you to bring all your resources to the challenge, and that perhaps enables a flow. That's at least how I understand it. Tammy, would I know maybe, yeah.
Right. I think of flow as a state. And as Jay indicated, that mindfulness as an ability or a skill can enable one to achieve that state of flow.
Right.
And I guess this state of flow has been quite disrupted with the pandemic and moving to working from home. And I know, Tammy, you've done some research lately to show how big that disruption was and how it affected work-family balance. Could you talk to us a bit about it?
Sure. So we know that the challenges for parents during this time period have been really overwhelming. So the big monkey wrench thrown in for those who've had to rapidly move or transition into remote work has been that their family has too. So partners are at home, children are at home, parents are having to serve as teachers. So it's quite a lot. And our natural boundaries between work and non-work have collapsed. So, we need to develop some strategies to manage those boundaries. Managing temporal boundaries through scheduling, negotiating with partners in the home, as well as managers when one is available for work and when one is available for family, trying to find a temporal rhythm to the day that will best meet the needs of everyone. So in one study that we're doing that is ongoing, that's exactly what we're trying to ferret out, if you will, how people are managing the rhythm of their day, and then how that does relate to outcomes such as work-family balance. And then, of course, there's managing the spatial boundaries, trying to identify spaces that are designated for work, those designated for other activities. And granted, depending on the size and configuration of the home, that's much easier for some folks than others. But those spaces help serve as a signal for both the self and others about role boundaries. But related to the spatial and home issues is the fact that you have a lot of people working from home who didn't have time to adjust and set up for it. So there are concerns from a health perspective about the ergonomic issues. And so we're looking at the extent to which individuals may be experiencing, for example, an increase in musculoskeletal disorders from crouching over their couch or sofa or the kitchen table. So in general, there hasn't been a lot of work linking remote work with various health outcomes. But, we are finding, as you might expect, with regard to work-family balance, that there has been a decrease from pre-COVID to post-COVID. And we haven't been able to do the analysis yet to really look at that, how that crosses with having children, spouses at home, a lot of additional analyses to do. But definitely for those with children, it's really crucial for folks to be able to develop support networks and identify neighbors and family members that can help, and also be able to disconnect from work. So one of the things that we know about remote work is that people tend to work longer hours. And we're finding that in our research as well, even though it's conducted within the context of the pandemic. So people do need time to relax and recover. And I think that's where mindfulness can come into play as well.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when I first started working remote, and this was not under pressure or anything. It was 10 years ago. And it was very, very hard to find a balance. It took me about a year to learn how to work remote, not overwork myself, how to negotiate space, how to negotiate time with my partner. And we don't have kids, right? So this is the easy part, not forced, no kids. And still it took about a year. And then basically we did expect people to move extremely quickly. And I would be quite interesting to hear, Tammy, if you do the research related to remote and health, especially bone structures and position and ergonomics, because all of the pictures that I see with remote work at home or co-working spaces, there is no chair which supports ergonomic sitting at the desk. Some of us sit on these, some of us stay standing, but most people are really crouching, somewhere in a small corner and doing their work. So I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. Tammy, what would you say about the rate of domestic violence that has increased? Did you study that as well, or not so much? It did increase during the pandemic.
I've read those reports. That isn't something that we have studied, but I think it's something that people did anticipate as well. When you have people, again, during the lockdown at home, not many outlets. One of the things that we did find in our study is an increase in alcohol use. A pretty large percentage of people reported that they were drinking more now than they were before. And we know that that's something that contributes to
outbursts of violence. Yeah.
Domestic violence, yeah. But that's not something that we have looked at in our work.
And also weight gain, right? I imagine that's one of the other effects.
Yes.
that we all see.
Yeah, I think it was about 30 some odd % of people said that they gained weight, and the average weight gain was between 5 and 10 pounds. And that was over just a 4-week period.
Wow. I know I've been one of the slackers as well. We even built one of the rooms. We transformed it into a gym, which we used 2 times. So yes, but I didn't gain weight though, so that's good. Tammy, how about mindfulness to keep the balance between work and family? How could that be used so we can get to a point where we have that kind of stability, where we can be relaxed and work from home without the big stressors of every day? Yeah, kids, scheduling, rooms, space not available. How can that help?
Yeah. So what we found in our work conducted prior to the pandemic is that individuals who report they have a trait or ability to be mindful in their everyday lives report less work-family conflict and more work-family balance. And we also conducted an intervention type study where we gave people information about mindfulness. We gave them some sample ways to practice, breathing exercises, walking, meditations. And we found that pre and post, that the individuals who were given the intervention also reported a reduction in work-family conflict. So again, we have these initial indicators that mindfulness can be helpful in terms of work-family outcomes. So again, I think it gets back to the ability to self-regulate and be in the moment and be able to, whatever role you're in, be fully engaged in that role. And when you transition to the other role, to be able to leave the other role behind. We also did a study recently with dual career couples, and because that's an important dynamic as well. And we found that mindfulness was helpful in producing beneficial work-family outcomes for the couple. And I think this relates to the relational benefits that come with mindfulness as well. That you're able to perhaps better negotiate with your partner. Your partner is more empathetic, and it can help produce a greater sense of teamwork within the couple, if you will, that enables them to again, better manage both their work and family roles.
Tammy, I have a few technical questions. So when you say work-family conflict, how many would be a usual per year, or what should we think of, and what is the reduction? So is it 4 times a year it's usual, 2 times a year, 2 times a month? How do you measure?
That's a great question. So historically, the way that we've studied mindfulness is with a Likert type scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree. So you get a general level of overall or chronic work-family conflict. So it's very difficult to be able to say, okay, we reduce the number of conflicts by X amount. Some of the work that we've been doing recently, though, is designed to study episodes of work-family conflict. So we can better understand exactly what these conflicts consist of and how people are able to resolve them. And then in that case, we can get more of a count or a frequency estimate of work-family conflict. And we haven't married that episodic work just yet with any of our work on mindfulness.
So this is how people usually relate to conflict, right? Even if it's a small disagreement, they might say it's conflict and it gets into the report. Or you get just to understand what work-family conflict is a bit.
Yeah, so in an episodic approach to work-family conflict, we would define work-family conflict. We would let people know we're talking about competing demands between work and family that make it difficult to be effective in one or the other role. And then we'd ask them to indicate if they experienced a work-family conflict that day, and if so, to describe it. So it could be, for example, that your boss asked you to stay late at work when you already have something scheduled with a child. You need to take your child to piano lessons that day. So that's a work-family conflict. And at that point, then the individual really has to make a decision. Do I tell the boss, no, I can't stay late because I have something else happening? Or do you try and perhaps call a partner and say, can you take our child to piano tonight? And so that results in either work interfering with family or family interfering with work. So you can really get kind of granular, if you will, at understanding what these conflicts are about and how people resolve them.
And when you say that you made an intervention and those who did it, they were able to self-regulate more. What was the intervention about? What did they have to do to get the positive results?
Yeah, so it was a very brief intervention, kind of trying to do a proof of concept study, if you will. So we brought participants into the lab. They went through just a 1-hour training session, if you will, where again, they were given very basic information about what mindfulness is. And then they were given, they went through 3 different exercises to practice mindfulness there within the lab. And then they were asked to set some goals. And then they reported over the following 2-week period how well they did in achieving those goals. And those goals were really practices. And so what we found then over a short period of time, just 2 weeks later, is that there was this pre-post decline in this, average overall level of work-family conflict. And that the effect was stronger for those who indicated that they did practice.
That's very interesting. Is there a relationship with job satisfaction as well? So if you have a good work-life balance, is there a relationship with job satisfaction and then with job performance? Or they're separate? Yeah,
there's a very robust relationship between work-family conflict and job satisfaction. So meta-analytic research, large number of studies that have examined that. And it's also true for life satisfaction and family satisfaction. So when you think across satisfaction domains, we find that strong relationship with work-family conflict. There's less research looking at work-family issues and job performance. But, I would say to the extent that less conflict is associated with a variety of work outcomes, that there's probably some benefits that do trickle down, if you will, to job performance as well.
So this is a good indicator. Companies should start investing and not let their employees alone when talking about mindfulness.
Absolutely.
it's a benefit for them as well. Have you seen mindfulness practiced in the workplace? Jay, have you seen it?
Yeah, a number of examples, right? There are to a point where now it's become a little bit of a panacea for many issues, right? So, and it's okay. I make peace with that. But yes, there are a number of examples of companies that have adopted mindfulness both at an individual and a collective level. So, what do I mean by that? When it's individual, it's very much left to an individual to sign up on an app or sign up for a program. That gives you some benefits, for sure. But I do think that, and this has not been examined as well with research. There is anecdotal evidence. I've spoken to a number of practitioners where when a group of individuals collectively go through a mindfulness intervention, it seems to benefit the work unit as a whole, because there is some kind of a synergistic effect that everyone is doing it together. And this is one of the research projects that we are hoping to do in the near future. But there is widespread adoption. Number of companies, very well known names you may recognize. I don't want to name them because some of them I don't know which ones I have talked to, which have some kind of an NDA agreements and things like that. So yeah, but a number of them do use it, especially in Silicon Valley. I think there is a huge following of mindfulness programs.
And does this usually take the shape of, I don't know, attention games or just meditation, or what's the form that it takes in companies?
I think there's a wide variation, but most of them have a breathing practice. I think that's a body scan practice. Sometimes they have a loving kindness practice. These are like, some different types of mindfulness practices, but these three kind of capture the core, three different kinds of mindfulness practices. So the breathing practice is simply attention training. So you just kind of focus on the breath, and you either keep a count or you focus on sensations around the breath. This is really getting your focus, your concentration going, your focus going. The body scan practice is just like, scanning the body, for sensations. It's also scanning the body for emotions. It also helps with self-regulation. A third kind of practice is more a practice that improves empathy, compassion. So it is a loving kindness practice, is to expand one's sense of self, and to create a sense that, may there be less suffering for everyone around in the world, right? Like that's kind of an opening of the heart kind of practice. So there are different levels of resistance that people have to these kinds of practices, and I have seen various kinds. I've tried to teach all of these practices to corporate executives, and sometimes I'm surprised by how open people are, and at other times I'm also surprised by how resistant people are. So you get all kinds.
Yeah, that's what I was asking as well, because I've met with both. Most of the time I've met with resistance. Even though there's a lot of value, especially in the love and kindness bit, there's a lot of value to bring empathy. By the way, have there been studies which maybe look in those companies that practice mindfulness and their leadership practices mindfulness? Are there positive repercussions on the workforce, on their subordinates, if the leader practices mindfulness?
Yeah, so we had a paper that's actually one of my most cited papers, but it's where we find that when the leader is mindful. By the way, this must be clear. This study was actually a study which measured mindfulness as a trait, as an ability. It was not an intervention study. What we found is that when the leader is mindful, they had better quality relationships with their subordinates, and that actually led to better outcomes for the subordinates. So it seems that there is a kind of a contagion effect of mindfulness, if you will, which is that my mindfulness as a leader is actually spilling over as benefits for others. And this, I think, is an important idea for me, at least, to pursue. Something that I think we need to study a bit more, like use intervention studies, do many of those studies. But yes, very much so. And it kind of relates to what Tammy spoke earlier on, because in her studies, it's the family as a unit. So it's not only that if one partner practices mindfulness, the benefit is accrued to the unit as a whole, not just to the partner that's practicing. I think that's an important contagion effect of mindfulness. So you're actually doing service to the world by becoming more mindful. It's not as selfish an exercise as you think. You are actually spreading that goodness to the people around you.
And I think, Jay, you also found some relationship with turnover and performance.
Yeah, that was some of the early work. Yes, turnover intentions. Although that work, I must admit that we haven't followed it up with more studies. So I do think that for example, like if you are mindful that you're in a really bad situation, then your turnover intention should go up, right? Because you must notice the cues that this is not the right fit for you, and then you must leave the job. So although initially the way we studied it was turnover intentions reduce, I don't see why that effect should hold universally so, because many people are in jobs that they shouldn't be in. So perhaps turnover intention should go up for those. I've never tested that idea, and I'm not aware of anyone else who's tested that idea. But I certainly think that should be the case. We did find early effects on job satisfaction, on performance, on emotional exhaustion, all of those sorts of things. But on turnover, I think I do think that that relationship needs to be unpeeled a little bit.
So we just defined it. We know it is a powerful tool. How can we make it more prevalent in the workspace and then at an individual level in the family as well?
Right. So, I think, it has caught on now, Ilya. So I think, that question, I would have answered it differently a few years ago. I would have said, hey, we need more of this. But I think now there is an awareness of this quite widely so. I'm sure there is still more places that mindfulness can be beneficial, which is not there yet. So, but I do think sometimes companies look for mindfulness as a kind of a fix all problems kind of a intervention. So I've had senior executives who say, "Oh, I have a employee engagement problem. Can we do mindfulness?" Well, there are other things you should do first before you fix the mindfulness issue, because you are probably there are many things in the culture of the organization that's probably causing that engagement problem. So I think I'm torn how to answer that question. I do think that it can more people can benefit from these practices, but at the same time there is also a little bit of a faddish adoption of this in certain domains. So I caution org designers to just adopt mindfulness as a fix-all problems kind of an approach. I don't know what Tammy thinks about that. I'm very curious to hear.
Right. It's there's been so much media attention to mindfulness as well that on one hand, it can be very tempting to jump on that bandwagon and mayonnaise the mindfulness practice across the organization to try and address any and every problem. And as Jay said, of course, that's not a good approach. On the other hand, you still have places where mindfulness is viewed as this hippy dippy practice as well. And in that case, you have to demonstrate what the benefits are. And I think there's ample research to demonstrate that, particularly when it comes to stress reduction. So, it can be useful as one tool, I think, in an organization's tool belt. And of course, it should be applied smartly and in a targeted way.
Can mindfulness do anything hurtful in any way? Because I'm thinking instead of putting the burden at a later stage, right, and trying to all be mindful and pay attention, maybe we can start from an earlier stage, even from kindergarten and so on, and then learn breathing exercises, paying attention to what we're doing. So this gets to be a sort of a built-in skill that we all have rather than trying to fix something at some point. Can it do any harm, or could we just start it early on?
So I did, there are many attempts to bring mindfulness to schools and to younger children, and there are studies that show the benefits that children, gain from the practice. I was just speaking to a foundation that does exactly that across different parts of the world. So yes, it can, I think, be potentially useful from a very early age. There are certain clinical conditions that I think can be amplified with the mindfulness practice. So, it's also called a kind of the dark side of mindfulness. So there is a trauma, there is some kind of psychological burden that you're carrying. At least initially, when you focus on it, it can re-traumatize you. It can create further, issues for you unless you have a therapist or a practitioner supporting you through that process. So there are clinical conditions. So if there is a clinical condition that people are medicating themselves for, they certainly should consult with their therapist, medical practitioner who is aware of mindfulness. Many practitioners are not. They might just say, "Hey, that's some voodoo hippie thing." So you need to speak to someone who knows what they're talking about. So those are the kind of populations I would caution. But for most people that are not, clinically diagnosed with any condition, mindfulness can be beneficial, and it can be beneficial from a very young age as well.
So why is there still this hippie aura around this and the resistance to adoption? I don't know, maybe I'm not sure if there's research done on that, but I see it all around myself as well, because we are trying to get our friends to practice it or in whichever way. And then there is like, yeah, you hippie, of course you're doing meditation and you learn how to breathe. So why is there still resistance to it if in the end, with a few exceptions, it does have a lot of benefits?
That's an interesting question. I think essentially the process of cultivating mindfulness is long. It's not something you can do in one retreat or one intervention. It's long. Oftentimes you have to battle with yourselves. You have to deal with self-regulation issues that come up in the practice. So there is that kind of, you have to walk the fire before you see the benefits. So there is that reason why I don't think it gets adopted. The stigma of why it's associated with some kind of hippie idea, I think we've always been afraid of things that we don't understand, the esoteric, so anything mystical, esoteric, especially in a Cartesian scientific kind of world that we live in. I didn't grow up like that. I grew up in India, where none of this was considered anything other than normal. Like, I grew up with yoga and meditation all around me. It was not considered out of the norm at all. So I guess it depends on who you hang out with, who you're speaking to, what kind of cultural setting you have around you. So there are many settings in which this is not considered that. And I also think that the science has now moved on. So essentially, if you are now throwing mindfulness out, you're doing something just as egregious as saying, "I won't wear a mask." It's just exactly that, because the science is there that says that, like what Tammy said, it helps with stress reduction. Not for everyone, for almost anyone without a clinical condition. So if you are going to throw that baby out and say, I think that's voodoo, that's hippie, you're actually being anti-science. And that's what I would tell those who say that you're a hippie, So it's exactly the same behavior that you won't wear a mask.
Or vaccines. So, Tammy, if we would have to define a small tool set that families can use to be more mindful, to practice this, what would be 2, 3, 4 exercises easy to do that would help them on the long run to find that balance?
Yeah. So, and reflecting on the question before as well, because mindfulness is so attached to meditation, I think that scares a lot of people. And particularly from a work family perspective, the issue of time scarcity comes into play. And so individuals feel like they don't have enough time to do everything they need to do for work, everything that they need to do for their family. And now you're telling me that I should also set aside time to spend meditating. And that's time I could spend doing something else. So setting up a meditation process, or practice rather, can really feel like it's just one more thing that gets added to the to-do list. So I think you can make it, try to make it easier for people in a sense, that just you can start small. And as Jay said, it's a long process to really cultivate a mindful way of being. But if you can break it up for people, and tell them just start with a 1-minute connection with the breath a few times a day. Do it while you're washing hands, do it while you're sitting in the car at a traffic light. And then, try to expand that perhaps even within the family. Can the family sit together and connect with the breath? So I think, chunking it, making a kind of bite-sized pieces of mindfulness, if you will, can be a good way to get people started, and just recognizing how good it feels just to connect with the breath, to relax through a body scan, and build from there.
What Tammy said reminds me of a quote from, I think it's attributed to Gandhi. I don't know whether he actually said it. You can never believe anything on the internet. But I think it goes something like, the essence of it is that if you have a lot of time, you practice mindfulness or meditation for a certain period of time. If you think you have less time, you have to practice even more. So essentially, if you feel that sense of scarcity, that's precisely when you should be practicing more. So because, it just means that you are not able to cope with all of the demands that's being placed on you, which is why you're feeling that sense of scarcity. And mindfulness builds that resource that allows you to meet those demands. And that means that you should be practicing more. That just reminded me of that quote.
Yeah, that's good. It's often the people who need it the most who may be most reluctant to engage.
Yeah, which is very interesting. But it did have this effect on me, Jay, for sure. So whenever I feel pressured, I know that that's exactly what I have to do. Yes. But by the way, are there some specific tools or practices that you enjoy that maybe are conducted by others, something that you would recommend, even if they are for beginners or for more advanced people, something that you really believe in and you think they're well-formed? I myself like Sam Harris.
I like guided meditations. And, I don't want to mention any specific app, but we know that there are a number of apps that are available out there. And that depending on how you're feeling and what it is that you think you need, you can select a certain app that can be used for that purpose. If you're really feeling down on yourself that day, select a loving kindness or compassion meditation, for example. And again, I think that's an easy way to bring people into the practice, using guided meditation.
And do you do this every day, twice a day, twice a week?
I do breathing exercises every day, and then guided meditation. I have to be honest, I don't connect in that way every single day, but I try to most days of the week. And the personal entry for me into mindfulness was actually through yoga. And so yoga practice is something that I have as well.
And does it help you even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or do you tend to go longer? Where do you see the effects? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no. I think that, again, even 1 minute, I think is helpful. But there definitely is a cumulative effect as well that I've seen in my own life. So when I make sure that I have a regular practice, I reap more benefits.
There are a number of tools available out there, and there are so many of them. I don't have a particular recommendation, but I do think there are many free resources. So, for example, the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA has a bunch of freely available meditations. There is, there are apps like Headspace and Calm, and and some of them come with all kinds of gadgets. If you're one of those tech junkies, you can try Muse. You can put it as single sensor EEG on. There is Spire that comes where you can also test yourselves on. There's so many things out there. So I don't have a particular recommendation, but I think you can start off with something very simple, like a breathing practice. I think that's and then the body scan practice. So if you search for these, and there's Jack Confield. I really love some of their programs from the Insight Meditation Society. So yeah, and you really don't have to pay for it if you don't want to. But I do recommend Headspace and Calm. They're quite nicely designed as well.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And I think you don't have to pay for Sam Harris's as well. If you send him an email and tell him, which is, I think it was, at least for me, it helped very much because it takes you from 5 minutes to 10 minutes in a very nice way. And you learn how to do mindfulness and meditation, and including metta, so love and kindness, very, very guided. Yeah, it's nice. Absolutely. For someone who's a beginner, it's really nice. But yeah, I tried as well Headspace, and that's nice as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are many more if you let go of the secular needs. I mean, if you are okay with like a monk teaching you, then there are many more, and they're usually definitely free, because that's one of the core tenets of the contemplative traditions is you don't charge for a mindfulness instruction.
Yeah. And there are a lot on YouTube. That's how I started.
Yes, there are many.
Yes. So it's good to share this with everyone who wants to be a bit more mindful and wants to get that focus and attention delivered where they want it delivered versus running everywhere. Thank you both for a very, very interesting discussion.
Thank you. Nice talking with you.
Nice as well from here. Jay, enjoy your dinner if you didn't have it yet, or have a good night's sleep.
Thank you so much.
And Tammy, I hope it's sunny where you are and you can enjoy the day.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, both of you. Bye-bye. It was great doing this. Bye.